So welcome back to the Floriani Software Fundamentals video series on FTCU. My name is Mark Garetz and I'm a National Floriani educator, and in this section we're going to be covering how you use the font importer. So in our previous sections about working with fonts and text, we talked about the three different types of fonts that are available for us to use. One is our built-in fonts, the other is the Windows System's TrueType fonts, and the other are not really fonts at all, but they are embroidery files that just happen to be in the shape of letters, and then we use those to create words and text and things, but they're really not fonts that we can type on our keyboard. The way we would have to use those is we'd have to go to the folder that had all those individual letter files in it, like I have here already in my designs. So here's like an A, so you would have to bring that in, and then I would have to go back to my designs and say bring in a B if I wanted that next to it. And then to make a word, I'd have to keep doing that and then position all these independently. And it's not a very convenient way to do it, and I don't have all the same types of controls that I do when I use the built-in fonts. So what we have recently added to FTCU is a very cool new tool called the Font Importer that lets us take these embroidery stitch files that are in the shape of letters and actually bring them into the font system so that we can type them and use them with all the same controls that we do with our normal built-in fonts. And again, that's called the Font Importer. So I'm going to go ahead and delete these two characters here using my new controls that I'm really fond of. Our font importer is located right here, and it looks like a T with a magic wand. So I'm going to go ahead and click it to start our font importer. We're going to go over all the controls here, but the first time you use it, you're going to want to click a new font. So we're going to go ahead and click that, and I'm going to give this font a name. Now the font that I'm going to be demonstrating with, and the one that I just showed you a bit of, is a font named Connie, and it was provided to us as a courtesy by Lindy Goodall, who has lindygembroidery.com, and she sells these fonts, and she has a great selection of fonts, so I encourage you to go check out her site. But I'm just going to name it Connie because that's what she called it, and I'm going to click OK. And the next thing you want to do is select the design folder where your font designs are located, and mine are on my desktop. So I'm going to click these three dots here to bring up my browser to find the folder, and they're here on my desktop under this file right here, LGA 163 DST Connie 25 millimeters. And what that's telling me is that these were in the DST format, and that's 25 millimeters high, so about an inch high. And she has organized them conveniently for us into lowercase letters, numbers, punctuation marks, and uppercase letters. So let's work with the uppercase letters first. So I'm just going to select that, and I'm going to select OK, and it is going to read those stitch files and bring them into this window right here. Now there's several different ways I can get them mapped to the letters on my keyboard, which is what we do over here in the font mapping window. I can simply drag a character and drop it in. So I could say take this A and drop it in there, and it's going to give me this. The letter M is going to be used as a reference. Am I sure? And I'm going to say yes, because the M is a good one to use, and it's going to bring that in. And then we can adjust this however we want. Now I'm going to show you a better way to do that. And in order to do that, I'm going to delete this character. So I'm going to use this little X box here to delete it. And that is because all of these characters are in order, and I can use this mapping button right here, the A to Z button, for my uppercase characters to map them one at a time in order into here. Now they have to be in this order, which usually they are, but if they're not, you want to rename them so that they are. Okay, so in order to get this to work, you've got to actually select them all. So I'm going to leave this first one selected, and then I'm going to scroll all the way down to my Z. I'm going to hold down my Shift key and click it. Now before I do the import, let's take a look at this little checkbox down here, Convert to Outlines. Now we've been through Convert to Outlines before when it comes to bringing in stitch files, and this is no different. So why would we want to convert to outlines or not? Well, if it's a very, very complex font, say maybe applique and got a lot of weird things going on in the font, which some of these do, maybe you just want to leave it as stitches so that when you actually get to use it in the program, it's going to come in exactly the way it was digitized, and you're not going to be able to do much to modify it. However, if I check convert to outlines, and it's a fairly simple font like this one is, it's going to bring it in as vector outlines, and that means when I get to use this font in the system, I'm not limited to the stitches that were in the original. I could convert them to anything else I wanted to in the system. So in general, that's a good thing to do, unless you find that when you do that, it really messes the characters up, in which case you want to start again and leave this unchecked. So we're going to go ahead and check it. Important thing here is that it needs to be checked before you start mapping any characters. If you try and check it afterwards, it is not going to do anything. So we're going to check it first, and then we're going to use this A to Z button here to map all my uppercase characters. So I'm going to go ahead and click that, and it's going to map them all in. It's going to take a few seconds here because it's converting them all to outlines. And there it goes. Okay, so you can see that I've got my characters mapped in here now, and you can see that they don't look like stitches like the first one. They look more like outlines, and you can actually see the underlay and other things under there. So we've done our uppercase. Let's do our lowercase letters. So let me click this again, and this time I'll choose the lower folder and click OK. And this time I will select everything, and I'll do it backwards since I'm already at the bottom of my window. So now I've got all my lowercase selected, and I'll use this lowercase map button to map all my lowercase letters automatically. And you can't see them over here, but they're actually down below. I didn't scroll this down to show you. So we'll wait for a second to see how long that takes to finish. See, it's working. There it goes. So here's all my lowercase letters mapped now. And this button here, we can't actually use this button with the way that these stitch files are organized. This would require that your uppercase A in your folder is followed immediately by the lowercase a, followed immediately by the uppercase B, followed immediately by the lowercase b, etc., in order to map all the upper and lower together. So they'd all have to be in one folder. And then lastly here we've got our 0 to 9. So let me go over here and find my numbers and say OK. And there's my 0 to 9. I'll select them all, and I will map my 0 to 9s. This shouldn't take as long because there's much fewer. And then lastly, we might want to map in our punctuation. Now I'm not going to go through and map all these in, but let's go to our punctuation folder, and this will show us how we would map them one at a time, because there's no auto for that. But here's, for example, the exclamation point, and here's my exclamation point. So all I need to do to map that one is simply drag it into the window, and it's ready to go. So I'm not going to map all the rest of them like I said, but now let's take a look at what we need to do to get these to come out right when we actually type them into our software. So first of all, we could put in an author here. So I could put in Lindy G. All right, and I'm going to leave my spacing at 0, which is the default. I'm going to leave my word spacing at the default of 5. I will leave, in this case, my height the way it came in. If I wanted to change it, I would check custom height, and then I could type a value in there for my height in millimeters. But we need to do some adjustments to these characters so that they all come out right on the baseline when we type. So for example, this A is not designed to be up high like this. It should be down lower with this foot right here on the baseline. So the way we do that is we click it, and then we can simply click and drag that character down so that it's on the baseline. And the same is true of this G, because it's got a little bit of a descender. So I'm going to click and drag it down to the baseline. And the J is the same way. This should be going below. So I'm going to click to select it, then I click again to drag it. If I don't get these perfect the first time, and that's probably a little bit low, I'm just looking at the top here. So let me actually move it up. It's probably supposed to be right about there. The K definitely needs to come down. So I'm just going to move that down. And I'm doing this by dragging, but you could also do it here numerically if you wanted to. So let's see how that would work. Let's try that with the L. So I'm just going to click the down arrow. I'll just actually hold my mouse on it so it comes down, and it's coming down fairly slowly. Okay, right there. But this allows me to just fine tune it a little bit if my mouse isn't so accurate. So let me just scroll down in this window here. Let's move the M down. I'm too impatient to do it with the arrow, so I'm just going to do it visually. We'll go ahead and leave the P there. This R needs to come down, as does the Q. So we'll click and drag this R down. And you get the idea of what I'm doing here. I'm moving these down to the baseline so that when we type them, I don't have to spend a lot of time adjusting them. Now, usually in most fonts, you don't have to play with the capital letters too much. You would mainly have to do this with the lowercase. Now, here's another one that needs adjusting. So let's move this one down. Let's move the Y down. But you get the idea of what we're doing here, of getting these adjusted so that they come out right on the baseline. And let's just see what our lowercase looks like here. Our G needs to come down. So we'll just move that one down. All right. And our J needs to come down a little bit. So right about there. And probably our Y. All right, so we'll move our Y down. And then here's some foreign characters and things, and then we'll take a quick look at our numbers, and those look all okay. And our exclamation point that we put in looks okay. So once we've done all of that, all we need to do now is save this. All right, so if I save it, it's going to save that font just the way we did it. And I can click close. So I'm just going to go ahead and close it. Now when I want to use that font, if I come to my normal text tool, or any of these text tools actually, I will click it. Let's just do normal text. I'll put that in, and it's going to default to whatever I was last using. But now in my fonts list, I could scroll down and I will see Connie. And I will see by Connie, and I'm going to scroll below it so you can see that a little easier. There's a little F by it with a little pencil saying that this is a custom font. So if I click that and click apply, what I'm going to get is my text in that Connie font. And you can see that looks pretty good. All right, now I've got all my text controls, so I'm going to move this guy over a little bit here because that looks a little better to my eye, but that's pretty good. Now if I want to type something else in, like let's just see what my name looks like. And I'm going to click apply. I should see my upper and lowercase characters, and you know what? That looks pretty darn good. Let me just double click that zoom, and I'm just going to leave it the way it is. I might want to put just a little more space in here between the A and the G, and that looks really good. I'll click off it. I'll go to 3D mode so you can see what those characters look like, and that looks pretty good. And now that I look at it in 3D, I probably need to adjust some spacing over here, but you get the idea. That is the font importer. Now, if I looked at this and I said, you know, I want this M to be up a little bit, I see that its baseline is a little bit below the others. How do I fix that? Well, I go back to my font importer, and I would here now select a font. So I'm going to select the font Connie that we did, and it's going to bring all of those characters that we've mapped back in. And then I can use the font mapping window here to adjust them. And I can save it as a new name if I wanted to, or I can edit it by clicking here, and then I could rename it or remove it from my list here. And this allows me to, of course, move everything around. So once I did that, I unselected it. So I'd have to go back and select Connie again, and it would bring those characters back in, so I could say go down and adjust that M, and then when I save it, now my font will be adjusted. So this is a really, really nice tool for bringing in those stitch files so that you can type them and use all your font controls like you are used to using with the built-in fonts and the TrueType fonts. you can now do them with your stitch file fonts as well. And one last button that we didn't talk about, and that's the auto button here. So if I were to click a character, for example, and click auto, it would come up with a warning that says no designs could be automatically mapped because each design should use its corresponding character as the file name. So for example, it has to be a.pes, b.pes, and that's not how these are named. So that's what the auto button does. If your stitch files happen to be named this way, you can use the auto button. Otherwise, the more convenient way to do it is with these A to Z and number auto mapping buttons. So that is the font importer, and it's a very, very useful new tool.